All right, welcome to the conversation. We got an interesting guest for you guys. He's participated in a couple of movements you might recognize: Occupy Wall Street, Standing Rock, hashtag Bank Exit, 2017 California Poor People's Campaign. But you might have seen him on the program before as organizer and founder of Bank Exit, and we talked about how we can do public banks, etc. Jay Ponti. Jay, welcome back, brother.
Brother Cenk, great to see you.
No problem. So, hey, Jay, first question for you is, common misconception, and understandably so, is that Occupy didn't work, right? So what's your take on that? How do you see it differently?
Well, as with all things, we know that corporate media framed it that way specifically, and that we know how they drive specific narratives. But Occupy was a resounding success. It's important to also separate Occupy the movement from Occupy the tactic, which is to occupy a physical space. But the amount of movements and energy that came out of the Occupy movement fundamentally transformed the American landscape. We would not have the consciousness around the 99% versus the 1% movements like the fight for 15 for a living wage, for $15 an hour minimum wage. Strike debt came out of that. The divestment and public banking movements were really energized by that. And moreover, it fundamentally changed Americans' context around resistance, made it okay to go and protest without a permit. So I'd say, and I would say ultimately, probably the biggest impact was Bernie Sanders. The Bernie Sanders campaign was a direct result of Occupy Wall Street, not just obliquely, but a direct result of Occupy Wall Street activists who pushed Bernie to run.
So I know you're writing a book, and you connect those two things in the book. So help me understand that, or help the audience understand that. Why are those two things connected?
Well, I think the common mythos is that Bernie came out of the free market and he just went viral and his message just resonated. All of those things are true, but the extent to which Bernie caught fire was a direct result of specific tactical organizing efforts of a group of Occupy Wall Street activists, was known as the People for Bernie Sanders. And they actually messaged the entire Occupy mailing list. They had a bunch of, Occupy organizers on board with that mobilization. And essentially they had before Bernie even announced, they held events called the 99 events for the 99%. It was a big call to action. And some of those initial calls, house parties and calls became, Black Men for Bernie, different cities or regions for Bernie. A lot of those different groups, those affinity groups came out directly out of that organizing effort. Simultaneously, you had another group called Progressive Democrats of America, who was also bird dogging Bernie and basically traveling around the country, following him and saying, Bernie, we need you to run. And so it was a specific, Bernie would not have run without seeing that the grassroots movement to forward his agenda, especially to take on the Clinton machine, just would not have happened without that energy being there. So he was directly pushed by Occupy Wall Street activists who saw a Clinton administration as potentially what it was. What it was really a furthering of militarism, imperialism, Wall Street hegemony, and all of the other things that this country what it is.
So I remember when I interviewed Bernie in 2016, I asked him, when was the moment that you knew you had a shot at actually winning? And he said that he'd gone to a rally, I think it was Minnesota, but I'm not sure. And he said there's this line around the corner, giant crowd. And he turned to his advisor and said, who's got a concert after me? Who are they here for? And they're like, no, Bernie, they're here for you. And he was like, what in the world, right? Now, but Jay, I'm curious about the chicken and egg, right? To what degree is it the activist, and to what degree is it the zeitgeist? So, because like, I remember being amazed that Occupy was put together and succeeded in getting all those people there and getting the press attention, because the progressives are notoriously hard to organize. And whenever I asked anybody, they'd always say like, it was the moment. It was the moment. Like everybody showed up because they were, proverbial sick and tired, right, of the situation. So what's your take on that? Yeah.
Well, it's a combination of both. And a lot of, I think progressives would really benefit everyone if we learned our movement history. There's a terrific book called This is an Uprising, written by Mark and Paul Engler. I should probably see it over my shoulder, where they talk a lot about the whirlwind. And yes, it is a zeitgeist moment. There are moments where, it's a little more geared towards the status quo. Then there are moments where it's like a powder keg. Now, for organizers, it behooves us to know when to capitalize on those movements and when to mobilize our networks and to engage the proper tactics to really take advantage of those, moments, those trigger events.
Okay, so yeah, I noticed the books behind you, including Capital, huh? Looks like Karl Marx wrote a book. Anyways, so
it's Piketty. It basically proves that trickle down economics is a canard, basically.
Yeah, of course. So in your book, Be the Revolution: How Occupy Wall Street and the Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics, you talk about a bunch of things, and there's a couple more things I wanted to ask you about that because I found it so interesting. You talked about these secret Bernie Avengers. What? Who are they? They sound super fun.
Yeah, it was a group that we put together of activists, organizers, Hollywood professionals to essentially recruit a surrogate team for Bernie, and then we organized that team to do actions around the country. Like we created the Bernie's Diner in Los Angeles. We did the Clooney Counterparty, where when we threw the money at Hillary Clinton's motorcade outside of the George Clooney $33,000 a plate fundraiser, which, by the way, you were one of the only outlets that actually defended us when we were smeared by the corporate news. It was an absolute hatchet job. And we organized at the convention, we organized the platform committee, and it was we both recruited and organized a lot of the surrogates that you saw Stump for Bernie or bands that opened for Bernie. So it was to help the campaign in that way.
So we covered both of those, the diner and the campaign event. And it's always the same old tricks, right? So you guys went to draw attention to Hillary Clinton's donors, and hence you threw the money. And then it's sexist. What, right? And then Janet Yellen got $7 million from speaking fees to banks and other corporations. And then when we pointed out, they're like sexist. That doesn't make any sense at all. Men do corruption, women do corruption. It has nothing to do with their gender. It has everything to do with the corruption. And I want people to understand that when you see Bernie's Diner, as almost everybody in LA did, that doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from somebody organizing it. There's like this sense of like community organizer has almost like a mystical feel to it. It just means you organize things, right? You put things together and you bring people together. So which then of course leads to the next question, which is, but Jay, we've done this organizing for a while, and we have seen the results in that, hey, Bernie almost won twice, right? And yeah, he didn't pull it off, but like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that would have been unthinkable, no chance at all, right? And so you see the momentum, I see the momentum, and we chronicle it all the time. But that leads to the question of, but people say, how long is it gonna take? Especially when we have like losses like Nina Turner's. And it's like gut wrenching. And people keep wondering, when do we win?
Yeah, there's a great Simon Sinek video when he talks about the difference between finite games and infinite games. And you look at finite games have a winner and a loser, like a campaign is a finite game. Infinite games, you go until one falls out. The Cold War was an example of that. And he cites that one of the reasons that the United States has continually failed with military exploits like Afghanistan and Vietnam is because we're trying to win that war, which can't be won. And I think it's helpful if progressives take the infinite game approach. We looked at it, we're constantly working to transform these paradigms of consumerism, corporatism, militarism, patriarchy, colonialism, racism, systemic racism. These are all systemic issues. And so it is advantageous to take a mindset, like it's like a marathon mindset, or you got to keep pulling weeds out of the garden. But for me, I look at the progress that we've made just since Occupy alone, and it's astonishing. I think a lot of people were activated by the Bernie 2016 campaign or the Bernie 2020 campaign, and it makes sense to me why people would feel demoralized. But going back to 2004, there wasn't even anything called a progressive movement until a number of activists out of the Dennis Kucinich campaign started groups like Progressive Democrats of America and others. Being progressive wasn't even a thing. You would think of Teddy Roosevelt and the Progressive Republicans. Being a progressive wasn't even a thing. So I think it's important to take the long view and to look at we gain as much ground as humanly possible. We build big coalitions. We shift the Overton window on the issues. Medicare for all, complete, utter fringe issue in 2016. Even the climate crisis, they laughed Bernie off the stage when he said it was the greatest national security threat. Of course, the military knows it is the greatest national security threat, especially given the latest IPCC report. But for me, I think this represents we're at an absolute critical moment where our leftist movements and our organizers and those who would consider themselves progressives or leftists, we get to take a good hard look at ourselves and stop the infighting and see where we can come together to build coalitions, to fight for policy and to keep winning, especially in you call it a post-Bernie world. We have 8 years to go carbon negative right now, according to the IPCC report. There just is no more time, and we need to get better at our taxes. So the point of the book is to prove that a small handful of people with no resources can absolutely fundamentally change the world, which is what we saw with the LA and Seattle divestments. $8 billion divested from Wells Fargo. Straight up organizing against one of the biggest banks, corporations in the world.
No, that's right, and that's real, and that happened. And another thing that happened was we started Just Democrats, and it's real, and there's 10 of them in Congress. So don't let people take hope away from you, because it's a trick. And if you fall into that trick, then we'll never win. But you can see the progress. Yes, it's slow, but it's real, and we have to keep going. And Jay's absolutely right. The main thing is we got to stick together and keep. If they split us apart, then we become weaker, and it's harder to execute things. All right, Jay Ponti, organizing behind the scenes, making some of the things that you see visibly happen, along with so many other wonderful organizers. Thank you for joining us, Jay. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street is coming up on September 17th and 18th. There's a link tree that we have set up for Occupy 2.0. You can follow the Occupy Wall Street main Facebook pages and Twitter to find out more. We have an event in LA at 6 p.m. on Friday. Come down for a general assembly to have your voice heard. On Saturday, there'll be a march and rally, and it's a beautiful coalition event. We're going to take every COVID precaution, but we invite everybody to come out, tune into the live stream, and we hope to see everybody out for the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street.
Absolutely, it's also the 10th anniversary of Wolfpack, so a lot to celebrate there, because we started Wolfpack.
And you were out there. I heard you were out at Occupy Wall Street. I heard you were out there.
Oh, absolutely. That's where we started the Wolfpack to get money out of politics. All right, Jay Ponti, thank you, brother.
And thank you, Cenk, for uplifting those events. These platforms are important. All of our progressive platforms are important because I don't know if you noticed, but corporate news doesn't exactly cover our direct actions and cover a lot of our campaigns. So, the piece you did on public banking was an important moment, I think, to get that into the popular consciousness. So I want to also thank you for your organizing work on Justice Democrats, and also, it's nice when you get attacked by corporate news to have someone tell the truth.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.